These two ladies, so Dorothea and Ruth, took the Official Secrets Act. They meant it. And so they kept that secret from friends and family for 30 years or more. Not a soul was told. So we're going to be hearing today about some, some of it's a bit frisky, because I'm telling you now, these are time-travelling firecrackers. And I've had the privilege to talk to them before we met today, so to hear their stories. And we're going to be hearing stories about what it was like to wear trousers for the first time, what it was like to avoid getting into a relationship, because in war, life was very transient. Post-war, they continued their curiosity and their courage. Ruth became an entrepreneur, and Dorothea laid claim to what was traditionally a male territory at the London Stock Exchange. Now, over their first 100 years, they've continued to show extraordinary curiosity and an appetite for life. Teaching, photography, and even today they're both physically active with yoga and Tai Chi. So please welcome, a very warm welcome to Ruth Bourne and Dorothea Barron. So I'm going to start with you, Ruth, because you worked at Bletchley Park and you were there during the code-breaking time, and you joined in the 1930s. What was your role there?
Well, I was what they call a Turing bomb operator, B-O-M-B-E, and it was the machine that Alan Turing had invented to speed up the decrypting the Enigma code. So that's what I did. And there was a secondary machine which we used to check the first machine, and eventually we had a red scrambler, voice scrambler telephone, and we phoned the information through to Hut 6 or Hut 8, whatever, and they took it from there. We never knew what was in the information.
There were thousands of women over the years at Bletchley Park,
and
the odds of success for breaking the code, which changed daily, were enormous.
Yes, I think there were 158 million different ways that one letter could be encrypted. And Alan Turing said, well, obviously that's not possible. And he devised various ways of getting around it. If you see The Imitation Game, you will see Benedict Cumberbatch reinventing the bomb machine. And the film crew came up to Bletchley and they recorded the noise of the bomb machine turning round. So that was a very interesting piece of information that we gave to the film.
You were a gifted scholar before Bletchley. What was the recruitment process like, and why do you think, and how were you selected?
I don't know how I was selected. I think it was a mistake, actually. I had done languages, and I'd got something called a matric, which enabled you to go to the university without having to sit a special exam. I was going to read English, I think, read languages. And when I offered to join the Wrens, initially I was refused, but then I tried again. And during that time, I think they were beginning to beef up the number of people who were there. And so I got accepted. And they just said, oh, you can join. And so we went to Scotland and learned to scrub floors and empty bins and salute the quarterdeck and do other naval information. And then they said, well, you're going to HMS Pembroke 5. And we thought, goody, goody, we'll be by the sea, mackerels, sailors, you know, it's all very jolly. We never knew we would finish up at Euston Station. But this is what, Pembroke 5 was the code name, if you like, of anybody who was going to work on Enigma machine, on the bomb machines. And so then we were given our marching orders and a kit bag with uniform. And we said, what are we going to do at Pembroke? Oh, SDX. What's that? Special Duties X. Oh, what's that? Well, it's not Y. We haven't the faintest idea. You just find out when you get there. So we all finished up in the Chief Petty Officer's room, and she explained it to us that we're going to do very secret work. The hours were antisocial, there was no promotion, and once you were in it, you couldn't leave. So if you want to leave, leave now. We've got other jobs. And we all said, I think there were about half a dozen or more of us. And we said, yes, we'll definitely stay. We were very intrigued. We signed the Official Secrets Act. And then she said, one sentence only, we are breaking German codes. And that's all I ever heard. She said, you will never talk about anything you have seen or anything you've heard or anything you have done. And that's how I was recruited. Then we were taken to an outstation called Eastcote, and there were, I don't know how many bomb machines there, but quite a lot. And we were shown how to use them. We worked a month of shifts, so we worked a day of day shifts, not a week of days, a week of afternoons, week of evenings, and then home for 4 days. And that's how it chugged on.
Not speaking a word to family and friends about what you were up to?
No. My mother was a bit miffed. She said, you can tell me, you know, I'm your mother. And I thought, right, to be all over Birmingham. I had just told her I was doing secret, very confidential was the word we used.
And Dorothea, so you were desperate to get into the Wrens, but there was a slight problem.
Yes, I wasn't tall enough. I've never been tall enough. So I'm afraid I cheated and I cut up cardboard and put it under my heels and my shoes, and I puffed my hair up as high as I could go. And I said, yes, I'm 5'3". And of course I never was. I was about 5'2" and a bit. So in the end, I think they thought I was so keen to get into the Wrens. And I was keen to get into the Wrens because my uncle had been in the Navy in World War I. And my sister was already training to be a leading Wren. So I was dying to get into the Wrens. And eventually they accepted me. And it was always when you went to line up to march, it was tallest on the right, shortest on the left. And I used to pop down. And I was always the shortest one. But it didn't do me any harm. I think they saw I was so eager to get in, and I had excellent sight, very good eyesight.
In fact, you trained then as a visual signaller.
As a visual signaller.
What was the role?
Of course, we had none of this business in those days. And you just were in a signal station. I started off in the Firth of Forth, at a place called Hopeton. Hopeton House was where we all registered, but all we ever saw of Hopeton House was the bit of grass in the front, and we were allowed to play hockey and tennis and anything we could get our hands on that bit. And then I went from Hopeton to a place called Campbelltown, which is just off the coast from there. And I spent most of the rest of my time there. And then when the war finished, I found myself on a train down to Portsmouth. And I finished up at Ryde Pier, where we found that the ballroom floor was ideal for roller skating. So if anybody has ever tripped up on that floor, I'm afraid, mea culpa.
You were training in semaphore, and that was going to be really useful
Oh, yes.
on the D-Day landings.
Oh, yes. And we were also up in Scotland. We had a big troop ship full of sailors, of soldiers, ready for D-Day. We didn't realise it because, as Ruth had said, we were sworn to secrecy on whatever we did or whoever we were or anything. And we were unbeknowingly testing these sailors for getting off a whopping great troop ship into little motorboats and being ferried into waters where they could jump out and go into land. And poor darlings, they had to do it holding all their equipment and everything over their heads. And we didn't realise what we were doing. And also for laying Mulberry Harbour, which was supposed to open on the 5th of June, but the night before they had a tremendous storm, and Mulberry Harbour was just broken into bits and disappeared into the ground. And I didn't realise what Mulberry meant until years later when I went back with a school party on a French-speaking trip. So,
more of that later.
oh God.
So the years pass, the Official Secrets Act weighs heavily on you.
Oh yes.
Ruth, how did you break it to your husband that you had worked at Bletchley Park?
Well, it was, I remember it was tea time, and they had published a book called The Ultra Secrets. I think it was by Captain Winterbottom. And although there wasn't very much about bomb machines or anything, there was something about what we had done. And my husband had been actually working in the Ministry of Defence, and he'd often come home and said, well, I can't tell you this, that and the other, all that secret, you know. So I thought, oh, you know, my turn now. So, so I said, oh, look, in this book, it's all about what I did breaking codes in the war. And he said, that's very interesting, dear. What's for tea? So he was not to be outdone, ever. So that's how I broke it to him, yeah.
So, two young, gifted women, war ends. You've been skilled up. War ends, and does the world open up for you? What is the feeling? Do you want to leave it all behind and just look forward? Or how did it feel, like two young girls?
Oh, well, to me, it was, oh, okay, thank you. Possibly not even thank you from the Navy. And you can keep your uniform. Here are a few food coupons and a few clothing coupons. Off you go. And the suit I bought with my few clothing coupons, the only civilian clothes I had apart from school uniform and naval uniform, was a suit I bought And many years later, my 12-year-old elder daughter was wearing it. So it was a good quality one, and it lasted well. But we were supposed to go home, and our mothers feed us. And of course, lots of people hadn't homes to go to. They'd been bombed, and other people had formed liaison and wanted to get married, and there were no homes to go to. So when I eventually met my husband, when my sister had her first baby, and her husband was of a Polish father, Scottish mother, and he was shot down over Berlin, and everybody thought he hasn't got a hope in hell of not being shot, but because he spoke excellent English, he'd been to Kingston Grammar School after all, they spared his life. They thought he was English. Unfortunately, they got married, and it was at his first child's birth that I met my husband, who'd been in the RAF and had had a very distinguished career. And he went on to stay in the RAF and eventually finished up. He was a pilot trainee, and they said, we've got an aircraft that needs a navigator. Would anybody like it? And Andrew didn't know what a navigator was, but he said, yes, I'll do it. And he learned how to become a navigator, which he carried on into the RAF later.
You had massive support to continue and keep those skills up after the war from your mother. So your mum said, no, you're going out, you're going to the London Stock Exchange.
I passed my matric as well, with flying colours, and I was all due for university. But my mother had remarried during the war because my father was killed. And she said, oh, no, you don't. I've got you a job on the stock exchange. So I went and changed all the foreign currencies into their value in English halfpennies and farthings and things, you know. Very boring work. And then, I don't know what I did after that. Eventually, I ended up being an art teacher, and I sculpted a lot. I did a lot of sculptures.
But to go
and
back
then
to
I
that,
taught art at a school.
To go back to the point at which you, after the war, you got a job, that didn't go down well in all quarters, did it? To be a woman in work?
If you got a job in the war, they would say, no, she can't have the job, it's got to go to a man, he's got a family to support. Little realising that some women had families to support and elderly parents to support. But the jobs were supposed to be for the men, because the men had families to support.
And Ruth, you chose an entrepreneurial road.
Well, I had met my husband towards the end of the war, so we already were a couple, and he had his demod money and so on, so we bought a small house, and I think to begin with, I certainly didn't want to sit at home doing nothing, and he was, among other things, a mechanical engineer, and he had met somebody, and one way and another we finished up opening a Bendix laundrette. He stayed in the ministry. He started Ministry of Aircraft, and we opened this laundrette in North London, and I had the pleasure of sitting not in front of one machine, but 12 machines, with the drums going round, just like a Turing bomb. And it was home from home for me. And I ran this laundrette, and he went on with his job and mended the machines at night. And we kept this going for 15 years, actually, during which time I had 2 boys and brought them up. So I worked part-time then in the morning, and so that was chunted on.
I thought it was interesting that while you were in that position of being an employer, you introduced, which was unusual for the time, flexi time for
Yes.
working mothers.
I didn't know it was flexi time, but a lot of these ladies said, well, we can't do full time, and they seemed to be very adequate for the job. I liked them, interviewed them, and I said, well, how would it be if you did so half days and this and that? So eventually I gave them an empty job sheet, and every day, or every week rather, they came in and signed for the hours they wanted to do. I settled down, the same ones came, 2 or 3 people on a Monday and Tuesday, and then in the afternoon and so on. They all signed in, and they swapped with each other if the kids had to go to the doctor or anything. And I had my staff for nearly all of that time, once it settled down. And I just paid them for the hours each week that they did. So that eventually, I'm told, turned into the flexi time system.
Wonderful. And they stayed loyal, I guess. as a
Very
result
loyal,
of
yes.
that.
A
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of the, well, 1 or 2 of the other shopkeepers wanted to poach my staff. They used to come along, but they were so very happy working with me. We were like a little family in a way. It worked very well.
Wonderful. So, Dorothea, you still maintained that curiosity, that appetite for life. After the war, you mentioned pottery, but there has been a lot. So just take us through where that curiosity led you through your life.
Well, BKS Iyengar visited Harlow when I think I had 1 child then, and I went along and I did a yoga class, and I thought, oh, this is good, it's stretching me. So I went to yoga, and then eventually he went back to India, and people said, what are we going to do? I said, well, let's carry on with it. I got our village hall, and because we had helped to repair the village hall and paint it and everything, we could hire it for nothing if we lived in the village. So I got the village hall and started a yoga class on Monday mornings, and I still do it, over 100 years old. I'm still doing a yoga class every Monday morning. I don't take any money for myself, because I think it's so good for me to carry on doing it. And we stopped for coffee and bickies and birthday cake and all sorts of naughty things afterwards. And it's quite popular, and anybody can come along for nothing and try it out, see if they like it. But I now stress it's not so much yoga, it's more stretch and relax, because they love the relaxing. And at the end, I can hear, while I'm talking them down into relaxing, they're going. And it's very amusing. We all love it and have great fun. But I still do it. And I don't do yoga every morning, but I do try to keep my feet healthy, because that's important. The ankles that get broken. So if you do anything at all, exercise your feet. Like that, try to get the little toes on the floor, and it's amazing how you get them down eventually. and then the big coats on the floor. That'll keep your ankles healthy. And if you want to stay upright and not like this, lift the breastbone. That's all you do. Think of this. And I say that, breastbones and up go the chin. And I say, not the chins. So up go the breastbones and not the chins. And you see how it gets everything into place. So if you want to take any advice home, remember to lift the breastbone. You'll find that your bottom goes in at the same time.
I'm feeling it. I wish my bottom was going slightly more than it does. Thank you.
Just stand there and lift this. That's all you need to do.
It occurs to me that you're both from a time where teenagers weren't invented, but you've got that spirit still burning inside, isn't it? Yes. It's firing up, and it's infectious. If you had something to say, something for, young women today, it's a very different world. You could say that it's we're more fortunate, we've got more, but is there something that you would like to leave for younger women, that you would like them to learn from your experiences?
I think that women should be proud of themselves and their achievements, and leave the men to be proud of what they think they're doing.
What would you say? What would you say to your younger self, if we put it another way?
I don't know, I can't remember my younger self. That's much too far away. Press on regardless.
Yes.
Used to say in the war. I know when one door closes, there's always another one. You just have to look for the opening. I think women are very fortunate nowadays that almost nothing is barred because you're a woman. I know I had a very ancient auntie who wanted to be a doctor, and she went all through her medical training, but one section, they wouldn't teach her that because she was a woman. She had to go to Germany to do that particular part of her training. I mean, that wouldn't ever happen. Youngsters wouldn't even think that could happen. So I think we're very fortunate. I mean, I was able to move from one thing to another without even, I'm lucky that I was doing what I was doing. If I couldn't do one thing, I could train and do something else. I went on doing that. So I had plenty of opportunities, yes.
And you worked until you were 85, as far as I know. And Dorothea, you went into a Spitfire thanks to Johnny Gallagher.
Oh, yes.
Last year for your 100th birthday.
Yes, that was very exciting. I loved doing that. It was great fun, and one of the companies, ITV, invited my daughter to go along in an accompanying plane and took photographs, didn't they, darling?
Yes.
And it was great fun. I was waving to her and she was in the Spitfire next to me.
No, I wasn't in the Spitfire. No, I wasn't in the Spitfire.
Robbie was in the Spitfire.
Yes, Robbie was in the Spitfire.
But
you
a
were
real
in and Robbie was in the
Spitfire.
Well, it's been an absolute privilege to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories that you kept so quiet for so long, so successfully as a secret until you were allowed to.
Nobody was interested after the war. Oh, you were in the Wrens, well get on and do so and so. They just weren't interested after the war. The moment war stopped, you thought, that's over, let's get on with life. And we had to. And so you did any job you could get, and it made you very independent, didn't it? And,
yes, it did.
and I can tackle anything. So if I say anything to you, go out and tackle something.
Do something
And I've
new.
always said that when I die, no flowers, I don't want any flowers suffering on my account. Buy a plant and grow it. Any plant, tree, shrub, anything. And also, what was I going to say there? Well, that's okay.
I think Ruth was saying, do something new, like learn.
Yes, try
learn.
anything,
Yes.
tackle anything.
I know, after we sold the laundrette, I didn't want to do nothing. So I went back to college. And I went for 2 years and took a teacher training course. Then I taught pottery and adult education. And when they stopped the money for that, I thought, well, I'll train for something else. So I trained to be a counsellor. And eventually I worked with a GP in the practice for 13 years. And in the meantime, I developed pottery, like you developed
Yes,
your
we
yoga.
want to do
And I
something
became a
about
pottery teacher. And I took, I think it was 15 potters to Mexico. And we toured the pottery areas of North and South Mexico. It was a wonderful time. Very enlightening, and there was nobody said I can't do it, so I did it.
I think
And that's the
a-
wonderful thing now, that women can say I want to do it, and go and do it. Why not? Have a bash.
Couldn't
Yes.
be better anywhere myself. So thank you so much for your insights and your inspirational thoughts and stories from today. So
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone here for speaking to us today on International Women's Day. Thank you.